Welcome to Downtown Sports. My name is Downtown Stephen Brown, and in today's video, guys, we're going to be going over some rumors, talking about some big-name players that have been linked to the Toronto Maple Leafs in the last couple of days. Nothing too serious, but if the names are being brought up into conversation, it's always fun to further it and take a deeper look at things. Does it make sense? How much is it going to cost? Can they fit it under the salary cap? And the first one coming from Elliot Friedman, talking about Detroit Red Wings forward Tyler Bertuzzi. 6'1", about 200 pounds, so not a small guy, just 26 years old, not turning 27 until February, an agitator, kind of scoring winger. He is an RFA without a contract, but this is 100% undoubtedly a player that I would want the Maple Leafs to be interested in if he were to be available. And as for why a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi could be available, I went to, can I even call O Nyquist a peer? Fellow hockey YouTuber, I guess, Connor? Because he is a Red Wings fan, and I asked him, and he said, honestly, I think it's the same reason Mantha was available, just it doesn't really fit the timeline in Detroit. Say Detroit starts to be good again in 3 years, he will be almost 30, and dude, I would love Bert on the Leafs. He would be an amazing guy to replace Hyman. As far as what they would have to give up, I'm honestly not sure, because Bertuzzi only played 9 games this year, because he was out with a back injury. We'll touch on that in a minute. He's noting that he would want Rasmus Sandin, but that ain't happening. Maybe a package centered around Timothy Liljegren. And then he noted maybe not Liljegren, maybe a guy like Robertson, but that's not happening. He doesn't think so anyway. Maybe a guy like Amirov. By the way, if you're not subscribed to Connor here on YouTube, he is absolutely amazing. So do yourself a favor and go do that. His link will be in the description of the video. Now, as Connor touched on there, yeah, he would be a pretty decent replacement for Zach Hyman. Now, there is a conversation surrounding, well, the Leafs shouldn't just try to replace Zach Hyman. They should just get the best player available and play him in those minutes. No, I think they need another player like Zach Hyman. They can't just have too many of the same player. I like Tyler Bertuzzi would be very appreciated on the Leafs. During the 18-19 and 19-20 season, both of these players, no slouch, especially if you're looking at a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi and the contextual stats, the amount of time that he spends on the ice against the other team's best players, the quality of his teammates, so he's used to playing with other good players. He's not really being babied with his zone starts either. All the stats are where you would want them to be. And it could be two kind of similar players. Tyler Bertuzzi doesn't really fit the Red Wings' next window in which they hope to contend in, and a guy like Amirov, well, the Leafs are trying to win now, and it's not like Bertuzzi is that old or anything. Now, it's more than likely going to cost a little bit more than just Amirov. Maybe it's Amirov and a second-round pick. Maybe it's Amirov and a first. I don't know, that would be really steep. Maybe it's Amirov and another lesser prospect and like a second or a third-round pick or something like that. But even that's a pretty steep price to pay. But Bertuzzi is worth it. He's an agitator, he's a point producer, he's the type of player that you would want on the Leafs come playoff time. Maybe the back injury that only allowed him to get into 9 games or so holds back his trade value a little bit. Maybe it holds back his next contract a little bit. Maybe, he only signs a 1 or 2 year deal because of that to show that he's healthy, or maybe on a long-term deal, he comes a little bit cheaper. But in my mind, if you're giving up Amirov or Liljegren, or the package is centered around a first-round pick, or even if it's a couple of quality prospects, whatever it is, the trade only makes sense to do if you're getting value on that next contract, whether it be a shorter-term one or a longer-term one. Because I am not interested in paying a premium for a player and then having to give that player a contract like the Montreal Canadiens were forced to give Josh Anderson. Two very similar situations. Josh Anderson coming off of an injury that really stalled the season prior to the one where he was traded, and same thing as Tyler Bertuzzi. I'm not interested in doing this. No matter what your opinions are on Josh Anderson, I'm not interested in being put in this situation. Now, we will take a look at some more numbers and then the cap situation a little bit later on, but I want to take a look at the next player first, because we're going to be kind of comparing Hyman, Hall, Bertuzzi, kind of weighing the pros and the cons, maybe even throw in another name there or so, but, yeah, okay. That's an interesting little bit of information there that's highlighted. I wouldn't compare these two players directly, but I would say that Taylor Hall is sort of similar to Phil Kessel in the sense that they're not their team's best players. If they're their team's best players, they're probably not on a very good team. But you see what Taylor Hall is able to do in or on a team like the Boston Bruins, where he's not their first, second, or even third best player. He's just a very, very good complementary player. He's a guy who you can allow to play in a goal-scoring role, which is what he is. He's a point-producing offensive winger when you allow him to play in that position and surround him with other good players. Yeah, Taylor Hall is pretty damn good. And so is Tyler Bertuzzi, and so is Zach Hyman. I want everyone to be cognizant, it's a very fancy word that I'm going to Google to make sure that I use properly in about a second or two, of what the Toronto Maple Leafs' issue or problem has been the last 2 seasons. They couldn't score goals. And this is a little mock armchair GM that I whipped up just for the video here. It's not, nothing is too concrete, right? There's some estimations here, there's some placeholders here, there's some assumptions, but we can kind of play around with this a little bit. Guys like Nick Robertson, guys like Timothy Liljegren, are they going to get spots on next year's roster? I don't know, but I would sure like to see them play. And this also still has Kerfoot in this lineup. This has Dermott being selected by the Seattle Kraken and the Leafs trading Justin Hall or moving on from him. Because quite frankly, when it comes to Justin Hall, every time he's away from Jake Muzzin, he's garbage. And I don't necessarily see the Leafs giving up a guy like Kerfoot, who just had 5 points in 7 playoff games and filled a huge role once John Tavares went down, for a guy who they only played 13 minutes a night last year and was their 7th defenseman for the most part in Travis Dermott. But you have some room to play around with. You don't have too much cap space, but let's say you wanted to get a better shutdown centerman than a guy like Engvall. Let's say he starts the season in the minors much like he did this past year. That gives us a little bit more cap space to work with, but maybe that's not enough money to get that solid shutdown third line center, you know, that kind of two-way guy. So maybe you look at moving a guy like Alex Kerfoot, and he does have value. Like I said, he had a really good playoff. Now, you got $5 million to work with now. Is that enough money to maybe bring back a guy like Nick Foligno for $2.5 million and get your shutdown centerman? I don't know. That's more feasible, though. Now, we don't really have a lot of cap space left over to add to this team at the deadline, but I don't know. There are some estimations here. Maybe some guys take a little bit less and you end up with a couple more $100,000 to work with. And we've shown several times what having a couple of extra grand to start the season with can get you at the trade deadline. You can do a lot with very little, especially when you start getting into what the Leafs did with Foligno this year and what the Lightning did with Savard and getting double 50% salary retained. But that's in the scenario where adding a guy like Taylor Hall. Remember, the benefit, maybe you pay a little bit more against the cap for a player like Hall, but you don't have to give up any assets in acquiring that player who can play in your top 6 and be an impactful player. If you're acquiring a guy like Tyler Bertuzzi, like I said, it only makes sense if you can get him on a value deal. Maybe it's $5 million for 4 seasons. You know, that's a type of contract that I would have been very comfortable offering to a guy like Zach Hyman, and he's 29. That contract would have taken him till he's 33. A guy like Bertuzzi, a 4-year deal takes him until he's 30. But maybe if you're unsure about that back injury, maybe it's a 2 or a 3-year deal, maybe for a bit less. Maybe it's $4 million against the salary cap. And you're seeing in this situation with a guy like Kerfoot still on the roster having $1.5 million in cap space, and you can do a bit with that. You know, the Leafs have been rumored to maybe be interested in a guy like Corey Perry. Hey, you can carry an extra forward making league minimum now and still have some space left over. In this tweet from Jordan shared in an older video of mine, Taylor Hall is not a bad player on the forecheck. If you want my personal preference between the two, Hall, Bertuzzi, that we've touched on in this video, I would rather Bertuzzi. He just seems like he's more of what the Leafs need. But don't get me wrong, I would be stoked with either because they're two really, really good players. That's going to be it for this video, guys. Make sure to like the video if you did like it and subscribe for more, because more is always on the way. And guys, remember, like I've been saying at the end of all of these videos for the last while now, I will be here for the entire offseason talking about all this stuff. And I am doing that goalie video, I promise. It's just, the chart is coming along really slowly because I really want to do a good job with it. I want to show all the context, like I said at the end of the previous video. Don't worry, I am working on it. And I hope you guys are all well, as always. Take care, everyone.